Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign overview guide for Zhatan the Black of the Chaos Dwarves in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empire. Zhatan has a great deal of ability to build a massive empire as the Chaos Dwarves, but he also has a very complicated starting situation. In fact, I dare say it's probably the weakest start of all the Chaos Dwarves. Zhatan is incredibly strong, but his starting situation is just not that great. It's not hard per se, I would argue. Drazov has a very hard start. Zhatan's situation is just more so, it's a mess of a campaign start. But let's look at his faction effects and his lord effects. He gets an extra convoy, an extra active convoy in his campaign, and he also gets a 50% recruitment cost for artillery and war machine units. The recruitment cost is nice, but you're always going to be limited in cap, so even if they cost more, it's not too big of an issue. But the extra convoy is pretty huge, because with an extra convoy, you can get a significantly higher economic output for your empire. You can get laborers, you can get materials, you can get gold if you're selling armaments, so you can gain a lot of resources with Zhatan in his campaign throughout his entire campaign from very early on until much later on. This is very significant in terms of building a massive empire on the campaign map. He starts with an army with 2 Chaos Dwarf warriors, so he's at the cap, 1 unit of Hobgoblin Cutthroats, 1 unit of Blunderbusses, 1 unit of Wolf Raiders, and a Death Shrieker rocket launcher, which is useful because he's going to be dealing with some serious sieges in his campaign. Crucially, the Hobgoblins will also make it easier to recruit Kurtis. In fact, the first thing you may want to do in your campaign is go over here and spend 100 labor, so you get the quest over here to be able to unlock Kurtis Backstabber. You also get an extra local recruitment capacity because of his lord effects, and you capture 15% more casualties captured post-battle. Now, what does casualties captured post-battle mean? It means the casualties, the number of troops that you actually capture in a battle, especially if you're chasing down units. You have a unit of Wolf Raiders which are pretty good at that, so you will get more post-battle loot, or more post-battle laborers. And you also get the Sadistic Snare ability and that local recruitment capacity increase. Now, he gets a bunch of melee benefits over here, like armor piercing damage, reducing enemy leadership, bonus versus large, ward save regeneration. He is a powerhouse in battle, and his army is actually quite strong on the campaign map because he gets that plus 15 armor for his entire army, melee defense, and leadership. So you can take a bunch of army of laborers and actually make them quite significantly stronger. Though, of course, you would probably want to just recruit Hobgoblins in your campaign. Crucially, he gets the General of Zharr, which gives him minus 10% upkeep, casualty replenishment, plus 10%, and 1 recruit rank, and then he gets Subjugator, which gives him more casualties captured post-battle, so you're looking at 10% from skill line, 15% from his lord effect, so you're looking at the 25% casualty captured post-battle, and a labor gained post-battle, and income from post-battle loot. But what's the difference between casualties post-battle and labor gained post-battle? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's just go over against this army. And I'm just going to set the battle difficulty to easy so I can auto-resolve both these battles without taking significant casualties. You should always play these battles manually and try and chase down as many units as possible, even if it's an army like this, which you would be able to win easily against anyway. But labor gain post-battle is this number, and casualties post-battle affect this number, the transport captives. So Zhatan buffing both means he's really going to get a lot of labor in his campaign. Now, that is significant. The downside of Zhatan's campaign situation, you should probably always build a factory over here. The downside, the major downside in Zhatan's campaign is that he starts with a tier 1 capital, and it's very costly in terms of materials to get it to a tier 2 tower, which Drazov and Astrogov start with. So that is something of a downside. You should also probably get the gold panners as opposed to armaments, because armaments can be useful, of course, but you do need the gold, and maybe even spend the initial labor on instantly constructing this, or instead spend the initial labor on improving your conclave influence. There's benefits in both, like you can start getting that raw material production up and running, but also getting a lot of influence very quickly is significant. And this is what you should do on turn 1. Take that settlement, get the Hobgoblin mustering camp, get 2 Hobgoblin sneaking gates, 2 Hobgoblin archers. Now, let's talk about his campaign starting position and what the limitations are. Research-wise, I almost always want to go with labor quotas to get more labor gained post-battle, because getting a lot of labor early on. But let's look at the situation, toggling the Fog of War, which apparently has been updated. You start with a non-aggression pact with Kolic, which you can probably turn even in military access, then you might want to wait a turn before declaring war on his enemies. Because he's not going to wipe out these ogres, because they do have a camp over here, so he's always going to take over the challenge zone, then he's going to wipe out the ogres. So he's not going to be able to wipe them out instantly, and you might benefit quite a bit by just declaring a war on his enemies on turn 2, and maybe even getting a trade agreement with Kolic. The reason you want to establish good relations with Kolic is he's going to help you against Mr. Grimgor, but we'll get to him in just a moment. Now, the problem in your campaign situation, the major issue, is that the campaign is pushing you to go east. The problem with this particular area of the campaign map is the distances are fairly huge, so there's a lot of time lost. Time lost means fewer laborers, it means a weaker economy, means a slower campaign start, and you already have the slowest campaign start of any of the cast dwarves to begin with. But look at this situation, right? You want to deal with, obviously, Lothar, but you're probably going to need a second army because the distances are so vast, you actually need a second army to deal with the fact that Lothar, he loves to do the following. He likes to take his army, which has a hell cannon in it, and some cast warriors, and come over here down south and then attack the Fortress of Ice. That's something I've seen in my campaigns. While your army is here taking Ironstorm and marching on Bloodwing Keep. So you're probably going to need a second army very quickly, but you will struggle getting the money for that second army very quickly in your campaign, and you want to run as many caravans as possible. The best way of dealing with that particular situation is to go to the Imperial Wardens and declare war on Village. After turn 1, after Village wipes out their initial army. Now, of course, declaring war on Village is going to be brutal because you're suddenly going to be dealing with 2 of them. You could ally Village, it is possible, but he's just not worth the effort. I think it's just worth it more to get a non-aggression pact with these guys early on in your campaign, or even forget the non-aggression pact, deal with Village, then turn your guns on the Bastion and take the Bastion. Because your campaign objective is to kill Miao Ying and capture the Great Bastion itself. Those are your short campaign victory conditions. You have all the tools needed to succeed in that, and there's some wonderful landmarks over here, like the War Machine Graveyard, for instance, at tier 3, or in the Valerie you get the Tomb of Kengal Khan, which reduces the upkeep of all your hobgoblins by 15%. So there's some very significant benefits, because you get 15% from the tomb over here. Gorduz will give you 20%, so that's 35% upkeep reduction. 35% upkeep reduction, 45% with Strongholds Syndrome, it's a bit of a funny, 50% with Reduced Ration, 60% if you're looking at the General of Zharr, 60%, and I think someone has reduced it to 0% in their campaign. There are multiple ways of doing it. There's various ways of reducing upkeep via technology, via Lord skills, all that good stuff. There's multiple ways of reducing the upkeep of hobgoblins. You can get very, very cheap hobgoblins, or even free hobgoblins in terms of your upkeep, at least for certain armies, maybe not all armies in your campaign, but you can certainly reduce it by quite a substantial amount. But the problem in all of this is, if this was just a campaign about dealing with Village and Cafe, and you don't have to fight Village, you might not want to, you kind of just want to declare war on him just to get the money here, but you can beat him around a bit and just leave him to take the Red Wastes. He's not really going to help you in terms of taking the Great Bastion. That's why I wipe him out, because you may want the territory. It's good territory, it's safe, it's secure, it's isolated, and then take the Great Bastion. But here's the problem. While you certainly have all the tools needed to succeed against the Imperial Wardens in Miao Ying, just keep recruiting hobgoblins, increase your unit capacity eventually, turn this area in the economic heart of your empire. The problem is, one, the distances are so large, you're going to spend quite a few turns just traversing this area before you get to a battle. And two, you have Grimgor to the west. You start the closest to Grimgor of all the Cast Dwarf Legendary Lords, which creates the major issue that he's going to declare war on you. Now, if you can establish good relations with Kolic, maybe Kolic will step in to help you out, but the problem is Grimgor is going to come at you from the west. You're going to be fighting factions from the east. You could, of course, just take down Lothar over here in Bloodwind Keep, maybe sell the territory to Village and then force march to the west. But you still need to deal with Miao Ying, so you always have that tension. You have two choices. You either just deal with Lothar and then march west after selling the territory to Village and ignore this whole situation in the east and go deal with Grimgor, or you keep the momentum going. You don't waste the many turns that would take, because wasting those turns, just marching from east to west, would be a significant waste of time in your campaign. That's going to take you many turns and going to make your economy weaker. So I would argue, if you want to take the risky approach, the risky approach is you hope that Kholek manages to beat Grimgor or slow him down. Likely that Kholek will never defeat Grimgor on his own. I certainly haven't seen Grimgor ever being defeated fully by Kholek. Kholek can do a lot of damage to Grimgor, don't get me wrong that. I think Kholek's army and Atrazov, is, when both of them are legendary, when you're on legendary, very hard, and both of them are played by the AI. I think Kholek's own army is actually stronger than Grimgor's in terms of the Atrazov situation. But Grimgor will just get a second army, a third army, a fourth army, it doesn't matter. So Kholek actually struggles to finish him off. But that might give you enough time, if Kholek does damage to Grimgor, that might give you enough time to go deal with Cafe, deal with Miao Ying, conquer a lot of the territory over here, maybe start making some deals with Lokir, because Lokir is actually a faction that can like you, maybe make some deals with Snitch, or wipe out Snitch, take his territory for himself. But you have the potential of playing a Cafe campaign, but the major downside in this is, of course, you always have the Sword of Damocles hanging over your head. And if you do decide to head west, you want to do it as quickly as possible, but you can't ignore Lothar, right? You're going to have to wipe out Lothar yourself. That is unfortunate, because you're going to spend a lot of time. And the thing is, you're not even going to be able to take this entire province for yourself, because Village is just going to burn the Dragon Crossroad to the ground. Now, maybe you get lucky and he does it in such a moment that you can just reoccupy it after that point, and then Imperial Wardens declare war on you instantly, because the way the AI is scripted, from my experience, is that they want to take control of certain settlements, and they'll be very aggressive in taking those settlements. And the problem is that the Imperial Wardens do want to have control of the Dragon's Crossroad, from what I've noticed. So if you take the settlement for yourself, you're almost certainly going to end up at war with them, especially if you haven't wiped out Village for them. And even if you wipe out Village, they'll just declare war on you just because you have a settlement that you want, and they have a strong aversion. So you'll end up fighting the Imperial Wardens, and Miao Ying in this campaign is a brutal campaign. Not quite as brutal as Drazov, but Drazov does have significantly better resources than you do in terms of dealing with Emmerich, Tretch, Gorst, and then Grimgor later on, because he's also going to have to deal with Grimgor in his campaign. I think Zhatan is probably the least favorite Kastorf Legendary Lord from a community standpoint. He certainly, I think he has a great empire building ability if you can overcome his shitty early game, but it is pretty bad. It is going to be pretty rough. And unlike Drazov or even Astrogoth, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the caravans marching through your territory. So your early game economy, your start is the slowest of all the cast dwarves, but you certainly have a significant amount of potential because of all the labor you're going to get, because the caravans you're going to be running with. Those two are very, very significant to build a cast dwarf empire in the long term, but the early game is certainly the slowest of all of them. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.